Hi there, guys. So I'd like to go over the whipping boy in a little bit more detail. So you should have your day books with you and open to page 100, 101, and it goes on, of course, to 102 as well. So starting at the beginning, the young prince was known here and there and just about everywhere else as Prince Brat. Not even black cats would cross his path. So the reference to black cats is about an old Western superstition that black cats would bring bad luck, an omen of bad luck or death. And especially if you're walking along your way and a black cat crossed in the opposite direction or crossed your path, people in the old days used to feel quite upset about that. One night, the king was holding a grand feast. Sneaking around behind the lords and ladies, Prince Brat tied their powdered wigs to the backs of their oak chairs. What is a brat, by the way? A brat is a child who's misbehaves a great deal, a very naughty child. Now, this prince is the Prince of Brattenberg. So the brat could be a shortened form of Brattenberg, but it also means that he's very naughty. So the prince tied their powdered wigs to the backs of their oak chairs. So this story took place hundreds of years ago. You know, it's a kind of mythical story. It didn't really occur, of course. But in those days, it was the fashion for men to wear, especially wealthy men or powerful men, to wear wigs. And they wanted their hair to look white, actually. So they would even powder them with some, I don't know if it was like flour or some kind of white powder they would put on their wigs to make them look more white. Then he hid behind a footman to wait. Of course, he's playing a prank on these guys. We know what's going to happen when they stand up, that their wigs will be pulled off because they're tied to the chairs. When the guests stood up to toast the king, their wigs came flying off. The lords clasped, that clasp means to hang on, they hung on to them, clasped their bare heads as if they'd been scalped. The ladies shrieked. A long time ago, especially in North America, I don't know if it happened in other parts of the world, but especially the First Nations people in Canada and the United States, when they were fighting with the white settlers who were taking their land away from them, occasionally would, if they caught a white person, they would cut off their hair and the skin on the top of their head that the hair was attached to, and they would keep it as a trophy for their kill, and this is called a scalp. The verb form is to scalp someone. The lady shrieked. Shrieked means to, I think you know, to shout. Prince Brat, he was never called that to his face, of course, because he was a prince, and it would be, you'd get in a lot of trouble if you insulted anyone royal. Tried to keep from laughing. He clapped both hands over his mouth, and out it ripped, a cackle of haw-haws, etc. The king spied him, and he looked mad enough to spit ink. Can you guess what spied means? Probably means saw him, spotted him. And the king was very angry. This idiom, mad enough to spit ink, just tries to express extreme anger. A very similar saying was mad enough to spit nails. He gave a furious shout, "Fetch the whipping boy!" Fetch, what do you think fetch means? I think you can guess. Fetch me the newspaper. Fetch me my cup of coffee. It means get, go and get for me. Prince Brat knew that he had nothing to fear. He had never been spanked in his life. So this is an interesting, this is the basis of the whole story, the idea of a whipping boy. The background of this is that they 300, 400, 500 years ago and before that, it was considered bad to spank a prince or a royal person when they were a child, but still you need to discipline. Everybody needs to be disciplined in order to grow up well. So the idea was that the prince would have a playmate that grew up with him who was not royal, and they would be friends. And if the prince misbehaved and did something wrong, then instead of spanking the prince, the whipping boy or the common boy who was his friend would be spanked. And you might think, well, how would that work? It worked because they were friends. And so the prince felt badly if his friend was being spanked because of what he did. Whether this really took place or not is not certain. It's a little bit mythical. Certainly there are no whipping boys in the world today. And it explains that there, fetch the whipping boy. So now on page 101, the king's command traveled like an echo from guard to guard up the stone stairway to a small chamber in the drafty north tower. That's an interesting expression. The king's command traveled like an echo, which really gives you a sense of it bouncing off the walls up a long staircase off into the distance. An orphan boy named Jemmy, son of a rat catcher, roused from his sleep. Roused, this is an unusual word. Basically, it means woke him up and got him up out of his sleep. He was roused from his sleep. In those days, a long time ago, rats were a big problem. They spread disease, as you know. We've already talked about the Black Plague when we read other stories, and they also were a pest because they would eat the grain and the corn and eat up the people's food. So they wanted to control the rat populations, and they did actually have rat catchers who were paid to catch the rats, and they did apparently sell the rats to some gambling institutions. And if you've read the whole book, you'll see how that is part of this story. Another famous rat catcher from literature is the Pied Piper of Hamelin, who you may have heard of. Okay. So he'd been dreaming happily of his ragged but carefree life before he had been plucked from the streets and sewers of the city to serve as royal whipping boy. So my question to you here would be, do you think he wanted this job, or was he taken against his will? Well, when it says he'd been plucked from the streets and sewers, that means he was taken. The verb plucked is usually used to refer to pulling feathers out of a bird like a chicken in preparation to cook it and eat it. So it's a way of getting something, a sort of jerky, pulling something out, a little bit violent. There's a sense of violence to it. A guard shook him fully awake. On your feet, me boy. So I would ask you, why does he use that expression, me boy, me boy? That's because that's obviously not good grammar. Well, it reflects the fact that he is the guard is not royal himself. He works for the royals, but comes from a common background, so he speaks like a commoner. Jemmy's eyes blazed up. A fire, if you throw a lot of little branches or paper or fuel like gasoline on it, will burn hot and bright. That's blazing, right? So his eyes blazed up like they were burning. So what's Jemmy feeling? Obviously he's angry, right? Then Jemmy speaks. Ain't I already been whipped twice today? Gaw! What's the prince done now? I like the way he speaks there. And this also reflects the fact that he's uneducated, comes from the common working class. And let's not keep the great folks waiting, lad, says the footman. And what do you think great folks are? The noble people, the important people. Okay, in the main hall, the king said, 20 whacks. Defiantly biting back every yelp and cry, the whipping boy received the 20 whacks or smacks or hits. Then the king turned to the prince, and let that be a lesson to you. Yes, Papa. The prince lowered his head so as to appear humble and contrite, but all the while was feeling a growing exasperation with his whipping boy. So, how is the prince trying to show himself to his father, the king? He's trying to show that he feels guilty and sad. That's what humble and contrite. Contrite means you know you've done something wrong and you feel badly about it. So all of us when we're young, myself included, and you probably as well, can put on that kind of expression quite well. But was he feeling humble and contrite? It goes on to say, all the while he was feeling a growing exasperation with the whipping boy. What do you think exasperation means? Do you think it means he was happy with him or he was unhappy? Unhappy. It's something negative. Exasperation is a kind of frustration, an angry frustration. In the tower chamber, the prince fixed him with a scowl. You're the worst whipping boy I ever had. How come you never bawl? Fixed him with a scowl. So a scowl is like a frown. Fixed him with a scowl. And fixed means stared at him with a angry face. What do you think bawl means? Bawl means to cry like a baby. So the prince wants to have a whipping boy that cries really hard when he gets spanked. I wonder why. It's an interesting question. But Jemmy, he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to play the game. He says, I don't know. Shrugs his shoulders. This is shrugging your shoulders. A whipping boy's supposed to yowl like a stuck pig. Stuck pig. Yowl like a stuck pig is another idiom. It just means to scream loudly. A stuck, when it says a stuck pig, it means like a pointy stick or something was stuck into the pig. And of course, if you do that to any animal or person, they're going to scream very loudly. We dress you up fancy and feed you royal, don't we? It's no fun if you don't bawl. Well, the prince seems to think the whipping boy's got a good deal. He's got nice food, fancy clothes, and the prince thinks the whipping boy ought to be grateful and play his part. But Jemmy doesn't agree with that. We turn the page. Jemmy shrugged again. He was determined never to spring a tear for the prince to gloat over. In other words, he doesn't want to cry. He doesn't want to give the prince any satisfaction. Yelp and bellow next time here, or I'll tell Papa to give you back your rags and kick you back into the streets. Rags. What are rags here? Well, I've got rags in the kitchen. We use rags to clean the floor, right? So they're old, very old shirts. We tear them up and use them as rags to clean dirty things. So the prince is saying that Jemmy's clothes before he became the whipping boy were just garbage, like rags. So when the prince says, I'll have you kicked back into the street, in other words, fired, you might think, well, Jemmy should feel sad. But no, it says, Jemmy's spirit soared. Much obliged, your royal awfulness, he thought. So he's thinking this to himself. He doesn't say it. I'll take me rags and I'll be gone in half the blink of an eye. So Jemmy spirit, spirits here refers to his feelings, and soared means to fly high. So obviously it's happiness, right? You know, great, you let me go? Wonderful. That's what I want. I want to get out of here. I want my freedom. Okay, so that's it. Bye for now. See you later. I hope you're not going stir crazy in your houses there for so long. Take care. Stay safe. Bye-bye.